The rain came down in sheets that November evening, turning the Chicago sidewalk into a mirror of neon and despair. I held my daughter closer, her small body shivering against my chest despite the 3 layers of clothing we'd wrapped her in. Emma was only 4 years old, and she deserved so much better than this. Better than the cardboard box I'd flattened against the brick wall of a closed bookstore. Better than the thin blanket that did nothing against the cold. Better than a father who couldn't provide even the most basic shelter. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Daddy, I'm hungry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drumming rain. "I know, sweetheart. I know." I pulled her tighter, trying to shield her from the weather with my own body. We'd eaten the last of our gas station sandwiches that morning, and I had exactly $7.32 in my pocket. Enough for maybe one more meal tomorrow if we split it. After that, I didn't know. 3 months ago, I'd had a job, an apartment, and a plan. I was Marcus Webb, a line cook at a mid-tier restaurant, working 60-hour weeks to make rent and keep food on the table after Emma's mother walked out on us when Emma was just 18 months old. The money was tight, but we managed. We had our routines: Saturday morning pancakes, bedtime stories every night, walks in the park on my days off. Then the restaurant closed without warning, the owner disappearing with 2 months of unpaid wages. I'd scrambled for another position, but the culinary scene was oversaturated, and my resume had gaps from the years I'd spent caring for Emma as a single parent. The eviction notice came 6 weeks later. I tried everything. Applied to over 200 jobs, reached out to every contact I had, even swallowed my pride and called my brother in Denver, who told me he couldn't help because he had his own family to worry about. The shelters were full, their waiting lists stretching into months. Social services said they'd look into our case, but everything moved at a glacial pace. Forms upon forms, appointments that led to more appointments. So here we were, on a Tuesday night in November, huddled against a wall while the city rushed past us. Everyone too busy to notice or too numb to care. That's when I saw him. He came around the corner with purpose, not the hurried scramble of someone trying to escape the rain, but a measured, deliberate stride. He wore an immaculate charcoal suit under a black umbrella, and his shoes, genuine leather, polished to a shine, clicked against the wet pavement. Everything about him screamed wealth, from his platinum watch to the way he carried himself with that particular confidence that only comes from never having worried about money. I expected him to walk past us like everyone else had. Instead, he stopped directly in front of our makeshift shelter and looked down at Emma, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep against my chest. "How old?" he asked. His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "4," I said, instinctively defensive. "We're fine. We don't need." "You're not fine," he interrupted. But there was no judgment in his tone, just a statement of fact. No child should be sleeping on the street in this weather. No person should be, for that matter. He crouched down, unbothered by the puddles soaking into his expensive pants, and studied me with eyes that were sharp and calculating but not unkind. He was maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of face that had seen both success and struggle, though the latter was clearly far behind him now. "My name is Victor Castellanos," he said, extending his hand. "And before you tell me again that you're fine, let me make you an offer. There's a hotel 3 blocks from here, the Riverside Inn. Not fancy, but clean and warm. I'll get you a room for the night, and in the morning we'll talk about what comes next." I stared at his outstretched hand, my mind racing through all the possible catches, the strings that would be attached. "Why would you do that? You don't know us." "No, I don't," he agreed. "But I know what it's like to have nothing. And I know that sometimes the difference between drowning and surviving is one person who decides to give a damn." He stood up, pulling out his wallet. "I'm not asking you to trust me, Mr. Webb. Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb. I'm asking you to let me help your daughter get out of the rain. Everything else we can figure out tomorrow." Emma stirred in my arms, coughing. A deep, wet cough that had been getting worse over the past 2 days. That cough made my decision. "Okay," I said quietly. "Thank you." The Riverside Inn was exactly as Victor had described. Modest but impeccably maintained, with warm lighting and a lobby that smelled of coffee and cinnamon. The night clerk didn't bat an eye when Victor approached the desk, just nodded respectfully and handed over a key card without asking questions. Money, I was learning, could make even the most unusual situations seem perfectly normal. Room 412, Victor said, pressing the card into my hand. There's a restaurant that delivers until midnight. Order whatever you and Emma need. It's already been charged to the room. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. My personal number. Call me tomorrow morning and we'll talk. I don't know how to thank you, I started. But he waved it off. Don't thank me yet. Just take care of your daughter. He paused at the door, rain still visible through the glass. And Marcus? Get her seen by a doctor. That cough sounds serious. Then he was gone, disappearing into the storm as suddenly as he'd appeared. The room was small but felt like a palace after months of uncertainty. Emma woke up as I laid her on the bed, her eyes widening as she took in the clean sheets, the television, the bathroom with its white towels stacked neatly on the counter. Are we home? She asked, her voice hoarse. For tonight, baby girl. For tonight, we're home. I ordered chicken soup and grilled cheese sandwiches from the restaurant Victor mentioned, and when the food arrived, I watched Emma eat with a desperation that broke my heart. She'd been so brave these past weeks, never complaining, never crying, just holding my hand and trusting that I would figure things out. What kind of father lets his daughter go hungry? What kind of man can't provide basic shelter? After Emma fell asleep, really slept, deeply and peacefully for the first time in days, I sat by the window and looked at Victor's business card. It was simple, elegant. Victor Castellanos with a phone number and an email address. No company name, no title, nothing to indicate who he was or what he did. I pulled out my phone, the battery down to 15% because I hadn't been able to charge it in 2 days, and did a search for his name. The results made my breath catch. Victor Castellanos wasn't just wealthy. He was a legend in the Chicago business community. Self-made real estate developer who'd built an empire from nothing. Starting with a single condemned building he'd renovated in his 20s and turning it into a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. But it was the other articles that caught my attention, the ones about his philanthropy. He'd funded homeless shelters, job training programs, scholarship funds for underprivileged kids. There were photos of him at charity galas, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, community centers. One article from 5 years ago detailed his own story. He'd immigrated from Argentina at 19 with nothing but the clothes on his back, worked construction jobs while sleeping in his car, saved every penny until he could buy that first building. He knew exactly what he'd told me on the street. He knew what it was like to have nothing. I set the phone down, my hands shaking slightly. This wasn't some random act of kindness. Victor Castellanos had made it his mission to help people like me, and somehow, on a rainy Tuesday night, Emma and I had crossed his path. The question was, what would he want in return? I called Victor at 8 the next morning, after Emma had woken up and we'd ordered breakfast from room service. Another luxury I knew we couldn't take for granted. He answered on the second ring. Marcus, how's Emma? Better. Warm and fed. Thank you again for. Come to my office at 10, he said. Not unkindly but with the efficiency of a man who had 1,000 things on his schedule. I'll have my driver pick you up from the hotel. We have things to discuss. The line went dead before I could respond. The driver arrived at 9:45 in a black Mercedes, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile who introduced herself as Patricia. She had candy for Emma, wrapped butterscotch that made my daughter's eyes light up, and she chatted easily during the drive, asking Emma about her favorite colors and animals, putting us both at ease. Victor's office was in a gleaming tower downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of art on the walls that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire life. His assistant, a sharp-eyed man named David, led us to a conference room where Victor was waiting with a woman I didn't recognize. Late 40s, professional attire, carrying herself with the calm competence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Marcus, Emma, welcome, Victor said, gesturing to the chairs. This is Jennifer Reeves. She runs a nonprofit I founded called Second Foundations. She's gonna help get you back on your feet. Jennifer smiled warmly at Emma, then turned to me. Mr. Webb, Victor told me about your situation. I want you to know that you're not alone, and we have resources that can help. First, housing. We have a transitional apartment building on the south side. Nothing fancy, but safe and affordable, subsidized through our program. You and Emma can move in as early as this weekend. I felt my throat tighten. I don't have money for rent right now. I'm still looking for work. The first 3 months are free while you get established, she continued smoothly. After that, rent is based on your income, never more than 30% of what you make. Second, employment. Victor mentioned you're a cook. Line cook, yeah. 10 years experience, mostly Italian and American cuisine. Victor leaned forward. I own a restaurant group, 7 locations across the city. I can get you an interview today if you're interested. The executive chef at our River North location needs someone with your experience. Today, I repeated, stunned. Today, Victor confirmed. I don't believe in wasting time, Marcus. You need work, I have work available. It's that simple. But why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why are you doing all this? You don't know me. I could be anyone. A criminal, a deadbeat, anything. Victor studied me for a long moment, then stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. 3 years ago, I was having dinner at one of my restaurants. A man came in off the street, dirty, desperate, clearly homeless. Security was about to throw him out when I stopped them. I bought him a meal and we talked. He told me about his life, his mistakes, his daughter who he'd lost custody of because he couldn't provide for her. I helped him get into a program, found him a job, got him housing. 6 months later, he called me to say thank you. He'd regained custody of his daughter. He was working full-time. He'd rebuilt his life. He turned back to face me. 2 months after that call, I read in the paper that he'd been killed in a car accident. Random, senseless, just wrong place at wrong time. But his daughter, she went to live with his sister, and because he'd gotten himself stable, she went to a good home instead of into the foster system. He'd done in 6 months what many people can't do in years, and he'd done it because someone gave him a chance. Victor's voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion underneath. I can't save everyone, Marcus, but I can save some. And every person I help is a chance to honor that man's memory, to make sure his daughter grows up knowing her father fought like hell for her. Just like you're fighting for Emma. The room was quiet except for the sound of Emma coloring on the paper David had given her, humming softly to herself, oblivious to the weight of the moment. I'll take the interview, I said finally, and the housing, and whatever help you're offering. But I need you to know, I'm going to pay it forward. Someday, when I'm stable, I'm going to do what you're doing. I'm going to help someone else. Victor smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. That's all I ask. The interview was at 2 that afternoon at Castellanos River North, Victor's flagship restaurant. The executive chef was a woman named Marie Sutton, a James Beard nominee with a reputation for brilliance and brutally high standards. I'd read about her in culinary magazines back when I still had time to dream about advancing my career. She didn't smile when we met in the kitchen, just looked me up and down. I was wearing clothes David had provided, nothing fancy but clean and presentable, and said, Victor says you can cook. Show me. She gave me 30 minutes and access to the walk-in. Make me something that tells me who you are as a chef. My hands shook as I gathered ingredients. It had been months since I'd worked a real kitchen, and this wasn't just any kitchen. It was gleaming copper pots, professional-grade equipment, ingredients I'd only dreamed of using. But as I started cooking, muscle memory took over. I made what I knew what had meaning. My mother's recipe for arroz con pollo, the dish she taught me when I was 10 years old, the first thing I'd ever learned to cook. I used saffron and white wine, roasted red peppers and Spanish chorizo, building layers of flavor while keeping the soul of the dish simple and honest. I plated it with fresh cilantro and a squeeze of lime, then stood back and waited while Marie tasted it. She took one bite, then another. Then she set down her fork and looked at me. This is good, she said simply. Not fancy, not trying to be something it's not. Just good, Honest food made with technique and heart. When can you start? Whenever you need me. Tomorrow. Second shift, 3 to 11. $12 an hour to start, plus tips from the split. Victor probably told you he owns this place, but I run this kitchen, and I don't do charity cases. You screw up, you're out. Understood. Understood. She almost smiled. Good. Now get out of my kitchen and go take care of that little girl Victor mentioned. She's lucky to have you. Emma and I moved into the transitional apartment that Saturday. It was small, one bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower that actually had hot water, but it felt like a palace. Jennifer from Second Foundations had arranged for donated furniture, and volunteers had stocked the kitchen with basics. Rice, pasta, canned goods, fresh vegetables, milk, eggs. There were toys for Emma, books, even a small television. "Welcome home," Jennifer said as she handed me the keys. "You have access to our resource center downstairs, job counseling, financial literacy classes, childcare assistance. We're here to help you succeed, Marcus." That first night, I cooked dinner in our own kitchen, nothing fancy, just spaghetti with marinara, and Emma and I ate at our own table, in our own space, without fear of where we'd sleep or when we'd eat again. She fell asleep in her own bed, in her own room, under a warm blanket with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, and for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not tears of despair, but of gratitude, of hope, of the overwhelming relief that comes when you realize you're going to be okay. The next 3 months were a blur of work and routine and slowly rebuilding what we'd lost. I threw myself into the kitchen at Castellanos, working double shifts whenever Marie would let me, learning from her exacting standards and encyclopedic knowledge. She pushed me hard, but fairly, and I found myself growing as a chef in ways I never had at my previous jobs. Emma thrived too. Jennifer connected us with a subsidized daycare near the apartment, run by a woman named Mrs. Chun who had raised 5 kids of her own and treated Emma like a grandchild. Emma's cough cleared up after a visit to the community health clinic. Bronchitis that antibiotics knocked out quickly now that she was warm and dry. She made friends, started drawing pictures of houses and families in sunshine, stopped flinching every time a door slammed. Victor checked in every few weeks, usually just a quick text, "How's the job going?" or "Emma feeling better?" But he never asked for anything in return, never hinted that I owed him, never made me feel like anything other than someone he'd chosen to help because he could. I started saving money. Not much at first, just $20 or $30 a paycheck, but it accumulated. I opened a bank account, something I hadn't had in months. I bought Emma new clothes, proper winter coat and boots, a backpack with her favorite cartoon character. Small things that felt monumental. Then, on a Tuesday in February, Victor called me directly. "Marcus, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. It's important. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just come tomorrow. Bring Emma if you need to." He hung up before I could ask questions, and I spent the night wondering what could be so important that it required an in-person meeting. Victor's assistant David met us in the lobby the next morning and led us up to Victor's private office. Not the conference room. Victor was standing at the window again, hands clasped behind his back, and he didn't turn around when we entered. "Close the door," he said quietly. David did, then left us alone. Victor finally turned, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. He looked at Emma, who was playing with a toy David had given her. Then at me. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you months ago, but I was a coward, and I convinced myself I was protecting you by staying silent." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" He moved to his desk and pulled out a folder, thick with documents and photographs. He set it down in front of me but didn't open it. "Before I explain, I need you to understand that everything I've done, the hotel, the apartment, the job, all of it was genuine. I helped you because I wanted to help, because I believe in giving people a second chance. But there was another reason, one I didn't tell you." "What reason?" My voice came out harder than I intended. Victor took a breath. "Emma's mother. Her name is Sofia." "Correct." The world seemed to tilt. How do you know? Sofia Castellanos, he said, and the name hit me like a physical blow. She's my daughter, Marcus. Emma is my granddaughter. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. I stared at him, my mind unable to process what he was saying. Sofia's last name had been Torres when we met, when we dated, when she'd gotten pregnant. She'd never mentioned family, never talked about her father, just vague references to a falling out, to bridges burned. And then she'd left when Emma was 18 months old, walked out without a word, and I'd never heard from her again. That's impossible, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I was looking at Emma, really looking, and seeing the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, features that suddenly looked so much like Victor's. I hired a private investigator after Sofia left, Victor said quietly. I'd been looking for her for 3 years at that point. We'd had a fight when she was 21. I won't bore you with the details, but it was bad enough that she cut off all contact, changed her name, disappeared. When the investigator finally found her, she was already gone. Left the country, he said. But he found you. And Emma. He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, surveillance photos of me and Emma from months ago, back when we were still on the streets. Photos of the night he'd found us, taken from different angles by someone I'd never noticed. Background check documents with my name, and a DNA test result. I had a sample taken from a cup you used at the hotel that first night, Victor said. I needed to be sure. The test confirmed it. Emma is my biological granddaughter. I felt like I couldn't breathe. You lied to me. You've been lying this entire time. Yes, he said simply. And I'm sorry. I told myself I'd tell you once you were stable, once you trusted me. But the truth is I was afraid. Afraid you'd think I was trying to take Emma from you. Afraid you'd disappear like Sofia did. Afraid I'd lose my only connection to my grandchild before I even had a chance to know her. He sat down, suddenly looking every one of his 50-something years. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus. I'm not asking for custody or visitation or any legal claim to Emma. She's your daughter and you're a good father. The best thing that could have happened to her. I just wanted you to know the truth. And to tell you that if you want me to disappear from your lives, I will. But if you're willing to let me be part of Emma's life, not as some stranger who helped you, but as her grandfather, I'd like that chance. I looked at Emma, still playing with her toy, oblivious to the bomb that had just been dropped into our lives. Then I looked at Victor, this man who'd saved us, who'd given us everything, but who'd also been lying from the start. I need time, I said finally. I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. I stood up, taking Emma's hand. Come on, baby. We're going home. I didn't call Victor for 2 weeks. During that time, I threw myself into work, processed what I'd learned, tried to figure out what it meant for Emma's future. I was angry, furious, really, at the deception. But I also couldn't deny what Victor had done for us. Couldn't pretend that we'd be where we were without his help. Marie noticed something was wrong. She pulled me aside after a particularly rough service where I'd burnt a pan of risotto, something I never did. Whatever it is, fix it, she said bluntly. You're too good a chef to let personal shit mess up your work. It's complicated. It's always complicated. But you've got a kid depending on you, and you've got a position here that could turn into something real if you don't screw it up. Figure out what matters and deal with the rest. That night, after Emma was asleep, I looked through the folder Victor had given me. Really looked at it this time, past my anger to what it actually contained. The investigation had started before Sofia left, which meant Victor had been searching for his daughter for years, desperate enough to hire professionals. The photos of Emma and me on the street were dated weeks before Victor approached us, which meant he'd been watching, waiting, probably trying to figure out the right way to help without revealing who he was. And the DNA test, he'd taken it not to prove something to me, but to himself. To be certain before he invested emotionally in a grandchild he might lose. I thought about my own father, who died when I was 12. I thought about what I'd give for Emma to have that kind of presence in her life. Someone who had resources, experience, wisdom. Someone who clearly cared, even if he'd gone about showing it in the wrong way. I called Victor the next morning. "I'm not saying I forgive you for lying," I told him when he answered. "But I'm willing to talk. Can we meet? Just us, not at your office. Somewhere neutral. Name the place." We met at a diner near the apartment, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner for 6 hours. Victor looked uncomfortable in his suit, out of place among the construction workers and retirees, but he ordered black coffee and waited while I collected my thoughts. "If you want to be part of Emma's life," I said finally, "you do it as her grandfather, not as some benefactor or charity case. You don't get to hold what you did for us over my head, and you don't get to make decisions about her without talking to me first. I'm her father. That doesn't change." "Agreed," Victor said immediately. "And you tell her the truth. When she's old enough to understand, you tell her who you are and how we met. No more lies." "Agreed. And you help me find Sofia." That one had taken me days to decide, but it was non-negotiable. Emma deserves to know her mother, even if Sofia doesn't want to be in her life. She deserves that choice. Victor's face tightened, but he nodded. "I'll have my investigator restart the search. If she can be found, we'll find her." I took a sip of terrible coffee and looked at this man who'd saved my life, who'd lied to me, who was my daughter's grandfather. "Okay, then let's try this. But Victor, you messed this up, you hurt Emma in any way, and we're gone." "Understood. Understood." He extended his hand across the table. "Thank you for giving me this chance." I shook his hand, and despite everything, despite the anger and confusion and complication, I felt like we might actually make this work. Over the next 6 months, Victor became a careful but consistent presence in Emma's life. He came to the apartment for dinner once a week, always bringing something thoughtful. A book Emma had mentioned wanting, art supplies. Once a small bicycle he'd assembled himself in our living room while Emma jumped around him excitedly. He taught her to play chess, simplified for her 4-year-old mind, and she somehow managed to win 1 out of every 3 games, which I suspected was because he was letting her. He never overstepped, never tried to parent her, never undermined my decisions, never showed up uninvited. He asked permission for everything, deferred to me on all matters, and slowly, grudgingly, I started to see him not as the man who deceived me, but as Emma's grandfather, someone who genuinely cared for her and wanted what was best. The investigator found Sofia in August. She was living in Barcelona, working as a translator, living under her mother's maiden name. She'd started a new life, complete with a new boyfriend and no apparent interest in the daughter she'd left behind. Victor asked if I wanted him to reach out. I said no, not yet. Maybe someday, when Emma was old enough to understand and decide for herself if she wanted contact. But for now, knowing where Sofia was felt like enough. At work, Marie promoted me to sous chef in September. The pay increase meant I could afford to move out of transitional housing and into a regular apartment. Nothing fancy but ours, a 2-bedroom place with a park nearby and good schools in the district. Victor helped with the security deposit, but he framed it as a loan, not a gift. We drew up paperwork, set a payment schedule I could manage, treated it like a business transaction because he understood I needed to maintain my independence. I paid him back in full by December. Emma turned 5 that October, and we threw her a party, her first real birthday celebration. Mrs. Chun from the daycare came, along with some of Emma's friends. Marie showed up with a cake she'd baked herself, elaborate and beautiful. Jennifer from Second Foundations stopped by with a donation to Emma's new education fund that Victor had started. And Victor was there, not at the head of the table, not trying to be the center of attention, just present. Emma called him Abuelo Victor now, a nickname she'd come up with on her own after I'd explained that he was my family. He'd cried the first time she used it, actual tears that he tried to hide but couldn't quite manage. I watched my daughter blow out her candles surrounded by people who cared about her, in a home that was stable and safe, with a future that felt possible again. And I thought about that night in November, huddled against a wall in the rain, certain that I'd failed her. "Thank you," I said to Victor as the party wound down. He was helping clean up, looking out of place in his expensive watch while washing dishes in my small kitchen. "For what?" for seeing us, for stopping, for giving a damn when you could have just walked by. He set down the plate he was drying and looked at me. You would have figured it out, Marcus. With or without me. You're a good man and a good father. I just helped speed up the process. Maybe, but I'm glad you were there that night. So am I, he said quietly. So am I. Epilogue. 2 years later, I stood in the kitchen of my own restaurant. A small place in Logan Square that Victor had helped me finance, though he'd insisted on being a silent partner, no name on the door, no control over operations. It was called Emma's Table, named after the little girl who'd given me a reason to keep fighting when everything else had fallen apart. We served the kind of food I loved, simple, honest, made with technique and heart. My mother's arroz con pollo was on the permanent menu, alongside Marie's mushroom risotto. She'd given me the recipe as an opening day gift, and a rotating selection of dishes that told stories of struggle and hope and community. Twice a month, we closed to the public and served free meals to homeless families. Jennifer helped coordinate it through Second Foundations, and Victor funded the food costs, and volunteers from across the city showed up to help serve and clean and just be present for people who needed to know someone cared. Emma was 7 now, thriving in 2nd grade, taking piano lessons and playing soccer and drawing pictures of her future. Pictures that always included our restaurant, her abuelo Victor, and a house with a big kitchen where she could learn to cook. Sofia had reached out 6 months earlier, a tentative email asking if she could meet Emma. We'd video called a few times. Awkward conversations where Sofia tried to explain why she'd left, and Emma, with the brutal honesty of children, asked questions Sofia couldn't quite answer. They were building something slowly, though I doubted Sofia would ever be a real mother to Emma. But that was okay. Emma had me, and she had Victor, and she had a community of people who loved her. Victor came to the restaurant every Thursday, sitting at his usual table in the back, ordering whatever the special was and leaving generous tips that I always donated to Second Foundations. He'd aged these past 2 years, stress from his business showing in new lines around his eyes. But he was happy in a way he hadn't been when we first met. Having Emma in his life had healed something in him, just like his presence had healed something in us. You did good, kid, Marie said, stopping by on opening night 2 years earlier. She still called me kid, even though I was 33 and running my own kitchen. Really good. Your mom would be proud. She was right. My mother, who'd taught me to cook, who'd raised me to believe that food was love made tangible, would have loved this place. Would have loved knowing that the skills she taught me had led to this. A restaurant that fed people's bodies and their souls, that gave back to the community, that proved you could build something meaningful from rock bottom. I thought about that night in November a lot, especially when I saw families struggling, when someone came into the restaurant looking desperate and hungry. I thought about how close Emma and I had come to falling through the cracks, how easily we could have become just another statistic, another tragedy that people shook their heads at but didn't really see. But Victor had seen us, and in seeing us, he'd changed everything. I made it my mission to see others the way he'd seen me, to stop, to help, to give a damn when it would be easier to walk by. I volunteered at shelters, donated to Second Foundations, hired people others wouldn't give a chance to. I told my story to anyone who would listen, not because I wanted sympathy, but because I wanted people to understand that homelessness could happen to anyone, that sometimes all it took was one bad break, one missed paycheck, one piece of bad luck. And I wanted people to know that sometimes, all it took to save a life was deciding that someone mattered. Emma ran into the kitchen on a busy Saturday night, still in her soccer uniform, Victor trailing behind her with his usual patient smile. She launched herself at me, and I caught her, swinging her around despite the sauce I was in the middle of reducing. We won, Daddy. 3-2. That's my girl. Hat trick. 2 goals and an assist. Abuelo Victor says I'm going to be a professional player. I looked at Victor over her head, and he shrugged. She's got the drive. Reminds me of someone else I know. Come on, I said, setting Emma down. Let's get you changed and fed. You can do homework at table 6 while I finish service. Can I help cook after? Always. As Emma ran off to change, Victor lingered in the kitchen doorway. You've built something special here, Marcus. Something that matters. We built it, I corrected. You, me, Jennifer, Marie, everyone who believed in us. It's not just my story. It's ours. He smiled. Fair enough. Same time next Thursday. Wouldn't be Thursday without you. He left, and I returned to my station, calling orders, plating dishes, moving through the dance of a busy kitchen with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they belonged. Through the window to the dining room, I could see families eating together, couples on dates, regular customers who'd become friends. I could see the corner table where we posted photos of everyone who'd volunteered at our community dinners. A wall of faces that proved people still cared, still showed up, still fought for each other. And I thought about how a single moment, a chance encounter on a rainy street, had led to all of this. How one person's decision to stop and help had created ripples that touched dozens of lives, hundreds of lives, maybe more. Emma came back into the kitchen in clean clothes, plopped down at the staff table with her math homework, and started working through multiplication problems. She stuck her tongue out when she concentrated, just like I did, just like my mother had. "Hey, Emma," I called across the kitchen. "Yeah, Daddy? I love you. You know that,